collection of aliens and strange technologies, almost worthy of my own. Such a pathetic planet, Earth. But yet, in the UK, Northumberland, there is such a collection. Yes, a collection so massive, so merciless, it will live on in history.
The Museum of Classic Sci-Fi Podcast, educating Lisa!
Hello everybody and welcome to the first episode of Educating Lisa, the Museum of Classic Sci-Fi official podcast.
Hello.
Right, and basically we're here today on a, how would you describe it, darling?
It's absolutely freezing. It's
Yeah.
a very cold Northumberland winter day.
Yeah.
It's very cold.
And even the Allendale Dalek, Mark II, bless him, not in his
Wrapped up.
shed, is wrapped up and looking a bit damp and sorry for himself. But that doesn't matter because we're going at the museum today and we're going to have a look in depth at one of the exhibits. And here we are inside the museum, which some of you may have visited and some of you will not. So we're now in the museum, first corridor. And for our viewers at home, Lisa, if you'd like to describe your very short journey to the main TARDIS door at the bottom.
Okay, well, it actually looks like our Christmas tree with the lights, like walking through a box of Quality Street, actually.
Oh, I like that. Quality Street.
Sweeties and
Right.
exciting things in the wraps.
Okay. Okay, so episode 1, Educating Lisa, and it's time to do what we say on the tin and educate Lisa. And we're going to look now at the first object.
Well, he's quite a beast, isn't he? Kind of a humanoid-looking thing. I would say he looks pretty old. 2 ears, 2 eyes, yellowy, mouldy custard coloured patches. A nose, brown-ish, I think. Looks like he's got 3 nostrils. A bald, lumpy head. Yeah, 2 normal nostrils and 1 side nostril. I'd be a bit scared if I met him in an alleyway. Has he got 3 nostrils? But his eyes are kind of odd. They're kind of like a bit like a... I don't know, they kind of remind me of like a housefly. Weird receding chin, but it's nappy fold of skin. I mean,
So, do you like him?
he's not... Yeah, he's no oil painting, is he?
Can you see why I love him yet, or do you need to know a bit more about him?
Yeah, I think he might be a slow grower, a slow burn.
Right, so I think it's time probably to find out a little bit more about this creature. Okay, I think it's time to watch some Doctor Who now, and then fill you in a little bit more about the background behind this chap here.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
Out of the TARDIS.
Hello, everybody. We are back. We have been down to the cellar. I have shown Lisa this week's artifact, the mystery object in the cellar, and then we've gone and we've sat through 1974's Death to the Daleks, starring John Pertwee and Elizabeth Sladen. At this point in the podcast, what I am going to do is give you a brief, and I mean that, synopsis of the story. It's not going to be a podcast where you find out the full... I'm not going to just read out the episode details ad infinitum.
Yeah.
Go and watch the story. If you haven't seen it and you like classic Doctor Who, go and see it. What I will say is, don't bother if you can't watch something without CGI and zappy effects. This hasn't got them. It's got some wonderful touches for the time, but it's all in camera. There's no CGI at all, and it's done on a small budget, but it's got a tremendous sense of fun and creativity, I would say. But here is the story. It's the one where the Doctor and Sarah Jane are about to go to the planet Florana on a little holiday. They get dragged off course onto this horrendous desert planet at night, and all the power is drained from the TARDIS. And they soon get split up, of course, because it's a Scooby-Doo level situation where you, of course, would split up in a hostile environment like that. And basically they meet a group of humans who've also been stranded there, and also the Daleks appear. It's not a surprise. The BBC were really good at those times of holding back surprises by calling the episode Death to the Daleks. It will come as a massive surprise to you, Lisa, wasn't it? You were shocked when the Daleks appeared. So the Daleks appear...
It's not a Cyberman story.
No, it's not a Cyberman story. So, because it didn't say so in the title.
No, there's a clue.
Yeah. So anyway, Daleks make a wonderful appearance, and they have to fight a living city and creatures on the planet called the Exelons, of which one is ahead in the museum. Suffice to say, there's a space plague. The Daleks have created the space plague, and this living city is stopping all the various parties from getting the perineum they need, this precious ore, to stop the space plague. I don't really want to say any more about it than that, because I think, to be honest, if I do,
spoilers.
Just go and watch it. If you want a good old bit of 1970s sci-fi, TV sci-fi, you're not going to go far wrong. So that is the synopsis. And now, what I'm going to do is start to find out what somebody who's never seen this before, in 2021, because I remember it as a child, this is one of my first stories I saw. What did you think of Death to the Daleks? So first of all, did you enjoy it overall?
I did. Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy it a great deal. It was a story I hadn't seen before. It was one before I existed. It was a year before I was born. So it was nice to see John Pertwee, and nice to see a story that was
John
there.
Pertwee, what a doctor.
Yeah.
What a Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Underrated now.
Yeah.
Just an amazing Doctor Who.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was nice to see a story from a different time, but it was nice to see something from the 70s. I am a bit fond of the 70s.
You are. This is not just, she's not just saying this for this podcast.
No,
Lisa, you do. We watch things like the Stepford Wives and other stuff, and it's,
So it was nice to go back there, and it was quite easy, I found, for me. It's not for everybody, just to be able to look at it from that period, to sort of think, I'm looking at it through the eyes of somebody from that time, and really getting
that is
immersed.
That is
it's
essential.
You've got to sort of suspend your disbelief and kind of not expect, whizzy special effects and things like that.
But what did you? Can I just bring you back to
Yeah.
John Pertwee a second?
John Pertwee.
What did you think of him as a doctor? Because I'll be honest, we all know the new series has taken us down a youthful actor route. Apart from Capaldi, apart from Peter, to me, I grew up with older Doctor figures. They were parental figures.
Yeah.
And I think none probably do that more than John Pertwee. Now, when I say he's an old, I don't mean he's sort of old cranky old man like the first Doctor. He has this sort of safe gravitas, and you'd feel safe around him.
Yeah, he's sort of wise. He's that parentally kind of
vibe. He is arrogant at times, but
he's kind of quite a gentleman and quite and it's nice to hear the way he speaks, because even that has changed now, isn't it? There's sort of like British, English languages has moved on in the way we talk to each other. And that was nice. I love his outfit and everything. He
looks the part.
He's who you want to be with in a crisis, I guess, on a different planet.
I think John Pertwee looks, sounds, acts the part. He's not trying too hard. I always criticise some of the new Doctors for being a bit smug, and there's not. Yes, he is arrogant, but there's not that same sense of trying to be cool all the time. And yet, ironically, he was in a way. I think as an actor, he was very conscious of how he looked. But it's just an image that's. I tell you what it is. It doesn't seem contrived. It feels like it's come.
Like he's got clothes on rather than a costume.
Exactly, and it's come from him. This Doctor, this is a personality that has come from naturally, effortlessly from this person. Whereas some of I sometimes think you can tell it's a young actor acting. That's my own feeling.
Although maybe the clothes he's wearing, they look like they fit him, fine, and his personality. But as somebody who travels through time, you'd kind of expect them not to stay, completely up to date with what's happening on Earth right now in certain countries. His it's like he's picked sort of shapes and clothes from all of time, and kind of thought, I like this, this smoking jacket kind of thing. I'm going to stick with this. It worked for me back then, so it's going to work for me now. And if it.
I just very quickly, was lucky enough to meet John Pertwee. I know some fans met him a lot. I met him just the once, and with my mum, who died not that long after. But I met John Pertwee, and he was doing a one-man show. We were right at the front. It was in Hexham, and basically in the northeast of England, Sci-Fi really, growing up, it was a desert, and you never got terribly interesting people locally into our local theatre. And suddenly, in the early 90s, John Pertwee was doing his one-man show in our local theatre. This is a tiny little theatre. I mean, I had my ticket before I probably time travelled to get it. And he came out on stage with the Doctor Who theme music playing. And this man just felt like the Doctor. And I know I've met other actors who played the Doctor, and it just was the Doctor on stage in a way that some I don't think have. Deliberately, some people, some actors are more detached from the role. Not Tom Baker, he's another good one, is he not? But John Pertwee was the Doctor on stage.
Embodying
the part. I'm going to move on now.
Okay.
Sarah Jane. What did you think of Sarah in the story? Because she's very popular.
Yeah.
I would probably argue, certainly amongst classic fans, probably the companion.
Yeah. I mean, she's great. I can sort of see, being female, it's nice to have a female character who's spunky and fearless, really. She's pretty, she's out there, isn't she, sort of...
yes, she really is.
Investigating and following her natural journalistic, talents, but she's also a nice companion. I can see why, John Pertwee's Doctor is hanging out with her, because she looks like she's fun to be around. She's got a nice sense of humour. She's intelligent. She's smart. She's got great 70s clothes.
How great are the 70s clothes that she's wearing in that episode? Because that's sort of a brown outfit.
Yeah, no, but I like brown. But I like the way she's got her sort of little blue top ready for going on holiday, and she just puts the 70s brown. I like the shapes of the clothes. She puts it on, and some nice sensible boots for running around on a different planet.
This is what's interesting.
Gorgeous glossy hair.
Yeah, well, that's interesting doing the podcast with Lisa, because these are things that I have to say. I think, and if I was a little girl, obviously I was a little girl, but if I was a little girl that had been born a little bit sooner and she was there as the companion for me growing up, I would have been like, go Sarah. Yeah, she was good.
She's very likeable.
I just think there is an X factor with actors and actresses when they do a part. I mean, it's like, I always think Mulder and Scully, who Duchovny and Gillian Anderson at the time were relatively unknown, and they took the mantles of those roles on, and they just were right. Absolutely right. And I think John Pertwee and Sarah Jane are just right.
Yeah, it's a nice chemistry.
It just works very well. Supporting cast. It's more difficult, I think, as an actor and actress, not that I am one, to be clear, although some people would say I can act a bit like one, be a bit dramatic. But I would say it's harder to make a mark in a drama, especially in something like Doctor Who, as a supporting cast member. Sometimes as well, the supporting cast members can maybe be a little bit wooden, but what did you think of the supporting cast?
Okay. The supporting cast. Well, I'm thinking about the humans to start with.
Yes.
Kind of noticing the sort of blue, brown kind of. Well, with Sarah, she's got blue and brown on as well. It's a bit colour sort of coordination. And what was the lady called? The female, Jill. Yeah. I noticed Jill's blue eyeshadow.
Jill didn't seem that confident. I didn't think.
No,
she seemed a bit more traditional female at the time, a bit sort of, whereas
a bit sort of.
I mean, Sarah was really trying to. I mean, bear in mind this was in the future. It looked like feminism had gone backwards a bit, whereas Sarah was sort of pushing.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Very nice though.
Lovely
lady.
Nice blue eyeshadow. I thought they were great. I really. For a supporting cast, it worked for me. I did like.
Are you talking about the one who was the traitor?
Yeah.
Duncan Lamont, who we'd watched. He is the drill guy. He comes in with a big drill in Quatermass and the Pit in the wonderful Hammer Andrew Kerr version.
Yeah.
And we just by fluke had watched Quatermass and the Pit because we had a Hammer week, didn't we?
Yeah.
We started watching Hammer
Yeah,
films.
I mean,
And he plays it. Again, he's a good actor, I think.
yeah, no, he was very good on that.
Yeah.
And one thing that's just sort of struck me was him on the ship in the future. You'd kind of think they'd want to be weeding out anybody who might be a bit unreliable or not very good in a crisis, or you know. And it seemed like they put him on the ship, and he wasn't the most reliable character, or you know.
No. He was like old school.
Yeah.
But again, he was almost like that militaristic approach, wasn't he?
So it's like the team, the sort of skill mix of the spaceship team wasn't great. So maybe the pandemic that the cast were going through, you know, had limited who they could put on the spaceship.
Possibly.
But that was kind of an interesting dynamic. It was sort of an odd mix of people on there, but they were on a mission that was believable. They were trying to get this perineum.
We had a lot of discussions about the perineum, which I'm not prepared to go into here.
No.
If you hear a thumping, by the way, in the background mildly, it's our daughter. Because she has got a bit of ADHD, she does have a trampoline in the house, like you do in her bedroom. So I do apologise in advance, but it helps her, doesn't it? Concentrate. It really helps her relax. Anyway, really, that's not a surreal aside. So I'm going to go back. In terms of supporting cast, I'll tell you my favourite character.
Yeah, Alan.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He's not called Alan. Lisa named Belal Alan. There are two sects, of Exelons. There's the aliens on the actual planet Exelon are, you know, the classic sci-fi savage, and they're I think very well realised alien creatures. The Ugugugs they do. You know, I think they do it differently, but I think for the time they're very well done.
I don't know, because it kind of made me think of like flocks of sheep or cows, and the fact that they're not speaking a language that, you know, Sarah, Jane, or the Doctor can, or you know, any of the humans communicate with. That makes them kind of a little bit more dangerous in a way.
Oh yeah.
And it I suppose it's getting across that sort of primitive kind of like. Because they'd gone backwards, hadn't they?
I mean, for those of you, if you've not,
backwards.
If you haven't seen it, they built this amazing city. The city becomes sentient, and starts to kill the people who made it effectively, and banishes them, and to sort of preserve itself. And you have, and then society, bits of H.G. Wells, splits in two, and you get the ones who worship the city as a deity, who basically regress in terms of intellect, and then you have Belal, Alan. Belal's this lovely little character who was at the time, I'm pretty certain under discussions that Belal stayed on as a companion, and I have to say the scenes with John Pertwee and Sarah and Belal are very nice, and as a character played by a tiny actor, I think it's Arnold Yarrow, something like that, I can't remember, but lovely. And I think looking at it, watching that, and I was watching it this time with you, thinking, could he have been a companion? I actually think, well, certainly yes. However, everywhere you went with Alan, with Belal, you are going to have to get past the fact he's quite an alarming looking creature.
Yeah.
And
he looks like he needs some moisture.
He looks, I mean, when you first see him, it's actually quite effective, because he comes out the rock and he looks a bit spooky, scary.
Glowing.
And I think so. I think he's a lovely character, and I think he, for me, wins the award, because even though he's wearing this really unmovable mask, there's no mouth. There's unlike a lot of the
very expressive in his posture.
Unlike a lot of monsters in Doctor Who at the time, John Friedlander did the masks. He was a famous monster mask maker from the BBC. I mean, he did Davros, and there's all sorts of wonderful things. He did the Exelons, but Belal, what he didn't do. He loved half masks. So the Draconians, he was one of these guys who, again, before the foam rubber and all these wonderful materials to make things, he had to use very basic materials. And one of the things he used to do was cut out the mouth, so the actor's mouth could be seen. Well, for some reason with the Exelons, he didn't do this. So you ended up with the Exelons, when you actually look at them, and you have Alan, bless him, is talking through a slit when you look at it. And I think, but it's despite that, I think he's a great
He's very
character.
expressive. Yeah,
and he works very,
yeah,
very well.
Yeah.
So I think, could he have joined the TARDIS crew? Yes.
Yeah.
However, he would have been an alarming presence every time he stepped out the TARDIS. You could say like Colin Baker, really, in that coat.
Yeah.
He was an alarming presence every time he stepped out the coat in that coat.
Well, I'm sure, even the Doctor, when he steps out on other planets, he must be a bit of an odd looking.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing this from a human.
Yeah, human perspective. Yeah.
I think we're going to look at now what you felt about the storyline, because you had some interesting things when we mulled it over. We were sitting on the settee watching this, and you kept saying, muttering intelligent things, because again, this is why you see, as a Doctor Who fan, I tend to think the costumes were made by L. Rowland Wan, and you kind of get that feeling of I tend to come from this very Doctor Who-y, who's the designer on that, who's this, whereas you've just looked at it cold, fresh, which is quite nice. So I think you were saying something about it hitting the zeitgeist in a strange way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you may be listening to this in the future and the pandemic is over and we're all recovered and happy and vaccinated and whatnot. But what kind of struck me is that this is a story set about in the time of a pandemic that's affecting people on Earth, and the crew of the what are they?
I think they're the Marine Space Corps.
Okay,
yeah.
Those guys.
Yeah.
They're out looking for the
Perinium.
I keep.
They're looking for a mineral ore.
Mispronouncing that one.
They're looking for a mineral ore, nothing else.
Yeah. They're not searching.
This is I was going to say this is the 1970s, but really, we'll leave that there as well.
Yeah. In a different sort of story, in a different sort of type of film, they might be looking for something else. But this mineral or whatever it is a cure for the pandemic that they're going through, and I just thought, wow, isn't that there's a parallel there to kind of what we're going through now.
Yeah.
And what struck me as well with that, with this being in the future, the people, the creatures, the aliens, they're all from highly technological societies, apart from the Exelons, and with their power being drained by the city, so nothing really works. They're all these highly sophisticated beings used to technology, and suddenly there's no energy. They can't use their equipment. They haven't, they're going back to sort of analog life. And it's especially like the Daleks when they start trying to shoot the guns and things like that, and it's they're just not working, and there's that panic.
The writer of this story is, of course, the late great Terry Nation, who invented the Daleks. But of course, you're a big fan, as am I, of the show Survivors.
Yeah.
And we've watched that, haven't we? And Survivors, the original version, was again mid-70s, and that was Terry Nation doing a pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's actually, it starts with a Chinese scientist spilling his flask.
Yeah.
And then you see him going into an
travelling
airport and traveling around the world and
spreading it.
Bing bong.
Yeah.
And I think there were certain themes, probably certainly a writer like Nation, there were certain themes that did pop up, and he likes a good plague. Because in Planet of the Daleks, they've got a contagion.
Yeah.
If I remember rightly, in a tank. I think it's like wallpaper paste with green food colouring, but they've got it in there, and that was about a year before.
Yeah.
And I think Terry Nation likes a good.
He likes that.
He likes a plague. But you're right. You watch these things. I think I used to watch plague films like you do, that old cheerful genre. You tend to watch them. It's almost like I'm trying to think, like Survivors, which you haven't seen. Survivors, BBC,
really
brilliant series.
Yeah, thought-provoking.
Yeah. You watch it and you kind of. It's almost like you're enjoying watching people struggle in a pandemic from the safety of your living room, and it's almost like, well, that's not happening. Well,
it does kind of make you think, doesn't it, of
what
would
you
do? It's a bit like zombie invasion, that kind of thing, where you sort of think, right, we barricade upstairs.
We're in a 4-story house, so we're okay.
But it's that kind of thing, isn't it? What would we do? How do they work that out?
And I think because we're rural, Survivors is very much a rural setting. It's in the countryside, so you feel like, yes, we could run across the fields and live in a shack and be chased by wild domestic, dogs gone wild with rabies. But we're going off the point.
We are.
Yes.
In the scenario in the program, the crew are adapting pretty well. It's mostly the Daleks that seem to be really, really freaking out, but they're going from being highly sophisticated down to bows and arrows, really. So it's quite interesting watching that. And the thing about the Exelons as well, I thought they were really quite fascinating as a group of creatures.
I don't think many critics will have ever called the Exelons fascinating before. So please enlarge the audience on why you think the Exelons are fascinating.
You're stranded on this planet, no energy, you can't get off the planet, you can't use your weapons, you can't defend yourself. And then you come across this very hostile group of beings that you can't communicate with, you know, that are sort of grunting. And they've clearly got a very strong religious dogma and belief system that they are, you know, devoted to unquestioningly. And it's causing you harm, you know, like Sarah gets caught, she's put into this, you know, this ceremony, this sort of ritual, sacrifice, punishment thing. You know, there is something very scary about that, you know, because you can't reason with them or challenge their belief systems or anything like that.
Again, 70s, there was a lot of, just thinking of what was around at the time, there was a lot of, I think probably later in the decade, but you had the cannibal films and things, you know, where you had the tribal, the fear of the tribe, like, you know.
Even like the cults, you know, like cults were starting to pop up. I mean, sort of just thinking about like the Manson gang. You know, it's not comparing the Exelons to that, but it's kind of it's that.
We're
sort
not
of following
saying that Charles Manson influenced the Exelons. We're not going there.
No, I mean it's kind of a very sort of folk religion kind of thing on a different planet, isn't it? But it's that sort of following, you know, some kind of dogma. They obviously can communicate with each other, but it's you know, it's unwavering, it's unquestioningly, blindly following this religious kind of dogma. I found that interesting.
The next thing that you commented on as we were watching it was the Britishness of Doctor Who.
Yes.
And this is an interesting one, especially at the minute. It's
like like watching, you know, old programs from that time. You know, the way people spoke is very different to how people speak in the UK now. And you know, even like, you know, TV presenters reading the news, they speak differently.
The regional accent almost dominates.
Now,
current, as we
rather
record
than the
this.
Queen's English. And
yes, it was
very
all,
clipped and proper speech.
And we'd come off watching Quatermass. And then into, which was 60s, and then we came into this, and it is a very different world.
It's very quaint, it's lovely. You know, even the Daleks speak with that kind of lovely quaint, you know, it's sort of very well kind of thing.
I remember, it's like very well, I'll lead on.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone go very well.
Very well, lead on! It's like, And when
that sort of rooty thing.
You like the root?
Yeah, it's kind of a bit
It's
tricky,
farmer's drain pipe. I used it in a school production of War of the Worlds to make tentacles. But yes, it's great stuff.
When it was like sort of zapping the Dalek with its
thing,
pointy thing.
Nose.
Its nose.
It's green nose.
Its green nose, which was electrical green nose.
Electrical green nose.
You know, the root had a direct hit to one of the Daleks, and John Pertwee's Doctor was good shot, sir.
It was a palpable hit.
Yes, it was great. Yeah, it was just this nice reaction of very sort of old British English kind of speaking, which is quite sweet.
It is. And of course, if you watch, I suppose, a lot of BBC output at the time, I'm thinking of things like The Good Life. It was like that. Blake 7 came along just a year or two after, and it's still kind of Queen's English, but it has got a tougher edge. Compared to that. So it is.
Yeah, because this is kind of like Brits in space.
It's Brits in space. It's. I think it's a bit like Terry Nation's Survivors was always called the middle class have a pandemic. And I think you could say the Marine Corps. It's a little bit. Hello, Jill. Come over here in the sand dunes. There's some blighter going to shoot you with an arrow over there. And it's like, you know, and there is that sort of simplistic view. But it makes. I tell you what I notice about old Doctor Who. It's linear storytelling, which you don't get a lot of. Everything now, I could be wrong, but I think the film that influenced a lot of this type of storytelling was Pulp Fiction, and I think which was a very clever film. Not my bag particularly, but it was a clever film in how it played with time. And you watch things, then you got things like Lost, which got lost, didn't it? But you've got a lot of things now are told in flashback and play with time, which is quite entertaining.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just nice to see A to B to C.
It's been quite comforting.
Yeah, I don't want to go to D and then go back to B always.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it depends how well it's done.
Yeah.
But I think that's the 70s Who.
Yeah.
It's linear, straightforward.
And I think it's quite nice in sort of times of turmoil like the present and uncertainty to watch something quite comforting and, you know, as comforting as being threatened by alien, dangerous beings or whatever.
And Roots.
And Roots and Daleks and all that. But it's kind of a comfy pair of slippers, kind of.
It is definitely a comfy pair of slippers, If you're watching this expecting, you know, I don't know, you know, something like the Infinity War or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Yeah.
This is a very relaxed, you know. It's
Yeah.
kind of,
And a relaxed adventure on the sofa.
a relaxed middle-class adventure with, you know, I'm going to ask you now about the Daleks, because Doctor Who fans are obsessed with Daleks.
Yeah.
Even I'm not. Just to be clear, I love Daleks. Of course, I love Daleks. I love Doctor
yeah.
Who. Daleks are part of it.
Yeah.
But I love the whole menagerie of monsters. Why I love Doctor Who was that it presented a range of monsters, and one of the most frustrating things until now, growing up in the 70s and 80s, was it was very difficult buying anything other than a Dalek. Or maybe a Doctor Who. So I had the Dennis Fisher Doctor Who toy, which I still have in my Dalek, my talking Dalek. But there was never a range of this. You had this wonderful range of monsters. Now, obviously, the Daleks made a massive impact. Massive impact. But nowadays, you've got figures being made of all these wonderful figures. It's a huge range. But I just wondered then, what did you think in terms of a threat, in terms of entertainment factor? How did you find the Daleks in Death to the Daleks?
Okay, clearly a threat. You know?
Really? You found them threatening?
I did find, I mean, they are always threatening, aren't they?
I just love them.
Yeah, they are lovely, yeah. I mean, it's a weird relationship, isn't it? It's like, it's a Dalek, you know, but it's at the same time, you know, I wouldn't want to be face to face with an angry Dalek, to be honest. And I thought it was quite an interesting dynamic when, you know, they're suddenly without their little guns and the energy, and see them freaking out and having to adjust, then having to, you know, work together with the humans. That was quite interesting.
They had some great freakouts in this story.
And then that one that was like, I'm a failure.
I'm a failure.
No, I just thought, no, you just need a bit of sort of Dalek therapy, I think.
For those of you who haven't heard this, which I'm sure most of you will have, the Daleks, Lisa, are encased, you know, the little blobs in there, but they're helpless. And the idea behind the voice and Terry Nation's idea about them was that they'd become totally claustrophobic and paranoid and powerless, so that when people were coming near them, they would be like, no, you stand back, you know, it was like that sort of stay away and freaking out. And when you look at them in that way,
and kind of...
that they're actually constantly on alert because they're so scared, because they're so helpless, and they've got these shells.
It's like they haven't adjusted to the fact they were in these armoured shells, isn't it? It's that sort of fear is still there.
The fear's still there. And I think that's a fascinating idea. And when I never knew that for years. And once I picked up on that, I think it was Richard Martin was talking about it. And in an interview I saw on a DVD, and it was fascinating. I thought, that makes them far more interesting. And
they're not if they're working from that sort of fight and flight all the time, they're not going to be making clear decisions. And
no, I wouldn't say dark. Well, they're quite decisive. But
but they're not going to be able to think things through quite as clearly as if they were, you know, kind of zen and calm.
How did you think they looked on screen? Do you think they looked?
It looked like a Dalek to me.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, I shouldn't ask this really.
To be fair, I didn't know Daleks were all different. You know, it was quite a revelation when Neil and I got together, and he was like, "Oh, there's this model of Dalek and that," and I just thought, really? I just thought they were different, maybe different colours, but I didn't realise they were. You know, I thought they were just kind of all the same with just balls on.
I mean, by this point in the show, we are now looking at a handful of the original 2 decades worth of Daleks, decade and a half of Daleks being recycled, mixed up, and so I think at this point, I don't know. I think for me they're a classic shape at this point.
It's
they are
like them.
No, the silver and black. I think they look better in grey, which would come soon. Well, it's actually had the previous year, and I think I just think that they are an effective presence in this. The voices are quite good. Because Daleks' voices vary a little bit, you know. I'm not going to nerd on about this because I'll do this with Simon. But bottom line is, I think the Daleks are effective. I think, key thing about this story, right, there is a wonderful special edition of Day of the Daleks on DVD. Now, having listened to a few podcasts, I realise that a lot of people haven't got this. And if you're going to do anything and to watch a classic Doctor Who story, go and get John Pertwee's Day of the Daleks and watch the special edition, because they've redone the voices and some of the special effects. And I just feel with Death to the Daleks, the music was by Carey Blyton. And whilst I do, and it was a saxophone quartet, and whilst I quite like it, I just think at times there's a comedy element with these Daleks, because when they come out the ship, it's like, you know, and it's like, instead of just a sonorous rumble, and I think a little bit of just ambient dark music. But then again, it's part of its charm is the fact there's a group of saxophonists following the Daleks around. Because that's what it's like. Obviously, it's like, here we are. You can almost feel them in the corner. And that, I think that would be, if I was in charge of like doing the special edition of this story, I think the visual...
That's about tuning your brain back into the 70s, though, isn't it? Kind of, in a way.
Yeah, I think when I first saw this series again in the 90s, when I got it on, or late 80s or whatever, when I got it on VHS, because I had it on tape, I remember thinking the most jarring thing about this was probably Carey Blyton's music, which is not essentially bad.
I have to say I didn't notice.
That's amazing. That's the one thing I noticed the most.
I tuned my brain to 70s.
To 70s.
So it was fine.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me wrong. It's certainly... I love Death to the Daleks.
Yeah.
Right? I always enjoy putting it on.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, if I was doing the special... A bit like what they did. Nick Briggs put the new voices on the older Daleks. Basically, they made a mess of the Dalek voices in Day of the Daleks at the time. Because the director... was Paul Bernard or someone, he did not understand the Daleks properly, and he just didn't take time on the voices. So you've got these really bad voices anyway, so they put new voices on, and what a difference. And I think for this, if I was, I'd give an alternative. Obviously I'd always put something out with the original intact, but I'd put an alternative with a bit more of a soundscape on, and I think it could be really that's just my bit.
I didn't notice that, but I thought they were good Daleks, good dangerous Daleks.
Yeah, I like them. I think it's a good outing for them.
Yeah.
I am going to now pull...
Fighting with the Root.
Fighting with the Root,
the mazy thing, that sort of underground tunnels.
That was nice. Yeah. I am now going to take us to the Exelon in the cellar, because this is educating you. So this is about looking at a prop in the cellar, and we have an Exelon head in the museum, which you can come and see. And what did you think of... Were you able to identify that in the show?
I think so. I mean, they are all a bit sort of browny yellow on screen. This one seemed to be a little bit reddy, and there was only one that I did notice that was a bit reddy, and that was like the high priest of the Exelons that was leading the sacrifice, kind of the execution sacrifice of Sarah Jane.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably that chap.
It's not. Sadly, I got that Exelon head about 12 years ago now, and I thought it was a screen-used head. I'd seen that Exelon head in various exhibitions in Llangollen and at the second Blackpool Museum. And one of the wonderful things about doing this podcast and doing the archive file that you can now get on Patreon.
He's been working hard on that.
Yeah.
It's looking good.
And do go if you want to learn more about the museum, get free entry and bonuses on podcasts and magazines and things. Please go to the Patreon on the music. Just go to Patreon, put in Museum of Classic Sci-Fi. Neil Cole.
Exclusive club.
Yeah, an exclusive club it is. Yeah. Anyway, this head I'd seen in exhibition, and when I first saw it, I was astonished that an Exelon survived, because the BBC for years had been selling off Doctor Who props. They just didn't care. They wanted rid of them, and they started selling them off as far back as 1983 at the Longley celebration event, and there was an Exelon went for sale then, and they'd been selling these props off, and I remember growing up seeing these sales happening, having no money as a child really, and I just thought, well, that's that. I never thought I'd ever get a piece of Doctor Who like that. And of course, as soon as they're being sold, they're never going to be on exhibition again.
Yeah.
And And around 2005, the second Blackpool Exhibition opened. There was the Exelon head again. The new series started, and at that time it certainly felt that the BBC had no interest in the classic show. They kind of pushed away the collection in Blackpool, where an entrepreneur and a very good businessman, David Boyle, a massive Doctor Who fan who'd made the Dapol figures, he'd created this museum. And basically he was paying the BBC to store the BBC props, because they're huge, some of these pieces. And he was doing them a big favour, but they were actually, because he loved it, he wanted to keep this exhibition going. And a lot of us are very grateful to him for doing that. And anyway, you could tell it was on borrowed time, the exhibition. It didn't obviously have the investment in it. It was run by a lot of love and a lot of, I used to go down virtually every month. And then eventually I could tell everything was going to be sold, and it was. And it was only then I realised that this head was in fact made for exhibition. And the reason it looked so old was because it had been in the infamous 1997 Longleat exhibition fire, when K9's motor, K9 went on fire. And unfortunately, some of the props here still had, a lot of the props had smoke damage, and it discoloured that head, and also melted and destroyed the circular eye lenses. Which is why it's without the eye lenses. And ever since, people tend to think, it's the surviving Exelon Priest, because he was a dark one. It's not. It's basically, it was made by Mike Tucker, visual effects assistant at the time, who's gone on to be a very prominent visual effects artist now. He made the head for display, and it was filled with foam. I think it's because it was filled with foam, it didn't just collapse and destroy. So it's a shame. And it's been on display in so many exhibitions. And if you want to find out more about it, I've written this the first issue of the Museum of Classic Sci-Fi Archive. It's all about it. It's a lovely little magazine I've done, and it shows you pictures of it through time. And so it's a fascinating head, because I would say it's probably the most photographed in terms of fans, because it's been the Exelon head. It was taken from the original mold.
It's like the representative of the Exelons in the public eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And also it has a chin, because if you look closely, you'll see that the Exelons didn't have a chin. And Mike Tucker was desperate to put a chin on it, because it looked bad when he was casting this one. This was in the 80s he was doing this. Ronnie Barker, there was a cast of Ronnie Barker's head. Ronnie Barker, go on.
For those who don't know who Ronnie Barker is, he was in the Two Ronnies, a comedy series, mostly in the 70s,
late 70s.
Late 70s.
Late 70s.
But it's a classic British comedy. And look it up.
So Ronnie Barker, famous comedian, there was a head, cast and chin. So if you look at this Exelon, you can see it. Once you've seen it, you think, oh my God, it's Ronnie Barker's chin. So that's the story of the Exelon head in the museum. So it wasn't in the show, but I would say it's had such
little threads tie off to different bits of history and story.
So it's quite interesting, and I think I chose this for this first podcast because it had such an unusual background. So there you go.
I can see. I can see why.
So I'll tell you what. I think from now, we're going to say ta-ta. Go and get a cup of tea, because I've taught myself silly here. So, anyway,
thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for joining us.
And bear with us with it being the first podcast with sound and hiding behind this lollipop and things like that. We're learning as we go, and we're endeavouring to make it better every time. But thank you for joining us.
And don't remember that this if you're listening to this will also be on the museum YouTube channel with video, so you can see us. For what in this crazy little room we're in. If you're not watching this on YouTube, so we're putting it on YouTube, and it'll be on the Museum of Classic Sci-Fi YouTube channel. If you put in Neil Cole and Museum of Classic Sci-Fi, you'll find it'll come up pretty quick. And also we're on Patreon if you want more bonus content, and if you want all sorts of, we've got magazine, we've got videos, Facebook groups, we've got all sorts going on.
Your Neil Cole's Adventures.
On Facebook I'm Neil Cole's Adventures in Sci-Fi Museum. Put in Neil Cole Sci-Fi Museum, it's going to come up.
This was a little joke. Because I was always joking about the watching films, Neil watching films as being sort of adventures from the sofa, having safe adventures from the sofa.
Yes, my adventures in the realms of sci-fi.
Neil Cole's Adventures.
Yes,
because it's your view of science fiction, isn't it? Your memories, your
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, and
your
I
relationship.
tend to call the museum just the Museum of Classic Sci-Fi now.
Yeah.
But it started off as Neil Cole's Adventures. Why? Because
Documenting
it is a personal
the
take.
museum being built, really. Wasn't it,
I mean, in the museum, generally speaking, I have objects that I really like.
Yeah.
But I've also put in things that I feel are important that perhaps to me are less important.
Yeah.
But I recognise that people like them. Like, for example, I do like Star Wars a lot. But I'm not as huge a Star Wars fan as I'm a Doctor Who fan, but I've made sure there's a little Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars is very difficult to get, by the way, but there's a little bit of Star Wars in there. And it's important because it is ultimately a milestone in the genre. So I'm trying to put in bits which, for the sci-fi history piece, which help, which what's the word? Satisfy people who visit. So there's a little bit of something, for everyone. On that note, guys,
we set off again.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time. Bye.